Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Glad to have you aboard. You're getting a little bit of a treat this week. This week's Fortress episode is dropping a day early, Thursday night, July the 14th, instead of our normal Friday night shindig, which would have been July the 15th. I have a concert engagement, so of course, next week, you will get the full review of the Sonic Slam Tour with Tom Kiefer, LA Guns, and Faster Pussycat. So enjoy the extra day here that you have access to this episode 48. Listen to it twice. Why not? And I would like to welcome aboard new podcast platform hosts, Amazon Music and Audible. Absolutely fantastic that they are now carrying the Fortress of Rock, along with our normal lineup of platforms: Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, and Stitcher. Appreciative to all of our platform hosts for making the room to put the Fortress of Rock on so you can all listen to it week in and week out. All right, as always, segment one, News of the World. A rundown of the rock headlines of the past week. As usual, most of this stuff has got to do with touring, announcements of new tours, illnesses, COVID stuff, you name it, we got it. So let's start off with that. Bruce Springsteen, finally, we alluded to this some episodes back that we were waiting on the boss to announce his 2023 U.S. tour with the E Street Band. Those dates have been announced. I am hoping he is going to add on more because this lineup of cities is lacking big time. I know I live in the Midwest. I have a bias against the West Coast, against the Upper East Coast. New York and LA get everything they want, whenever they want it, multiple shows. But how does Bruce Springsteen not schedule Chicago or Indianapolis on his 2023 tour with the E Street Band? That makes no sense to me whatsoever. He's playing Milwaukee, he's playing Detroit, he's playing Cleveland, but he will not come anywhere close to Indianapolis or Chicago. Grand Rapids could have been an option. Of course, you know how much I love the Van Andel Arena up there, and we'll talk about that in segment two. Very, very disappointed, very disheartened by this. I at least wanted to have a shot at possibly going to see Bruce Springsteen for the second time in my life. Again, I know it's like the Rolling Stones, even somebody now like Metallica. They're so big. They've got to pick the right venues at the right times to maximize the money because, of course, they're big, huge, massive rock stars, and they have to satisfy their egos. So again, I will just hope that there's going to be another leg to this tour in 2023, which includes Chicago and Indianapolis. Now, last week we talked about Carlos Santana collapsing after the July 5th heat exhaustion situation at Pine Knob outside of Detroit, Michigan. Now, initially, when I taped The Fortress last week, it looked like he was going to bounce back after missing only the rest of that show and one other show. But unfortunately, it's taking Carlos Santana a little bit longer to recuperate. So he had to postpone 6 more dates, putting the grand total to 7. And of course, we hope he gets better, take as much time as needed to heal up. Hopefully the tour they've got going on with Earth, Wind, and Fire will continue here at some point in the near future. The Joe Perry Project. Going to do 3 shows in the U.S., of course, again. Upper, Northeast. But because Steven Tyler is still in rehab and they're waiting to get the Aerosmith Vegas residency up and running again, Joe Perry's started up the Joe Perry Project again. Like I said, a trio of shows with Gary Cherone from Extreme on vocals. Now, I guess he's done this before. Somehow, I did not know this. I am a huge fan of Gary Cherone, of course. The third lead singer, official lead singer for Van Halen, and of course, Extreme. One of the most overlooked and underrated bands in America. Again, be kind of cool if they'd go on tour and we could all see them. Anybody who knows me knows I am not a fan of Rage Against the Machine. I think they're vastly overrated. I don't like their politics. We've talked about this over and over and over again. At least with Rage Against the Machine, I know going in what I'm going to get, so I can avoid it. It's not like an Eddie Vedder or a Bruce Springsteen, a Billy Joe Armstrong with Green Day, where you kind of want to hear the music that you grew up with and you loved so much. And you kind of hope and pray that they're going to keep the politics to a minimum. Now, you know, with Rage Against the Machine, that ain't happening. You're going to get Zach De La Rocca and Tom Morello full force telling you how they think, how they feel about everything, how you should vote, and you should listen to every word that comes out of their mouth because it is pristine. It is the truth in their minds. Well, they just started up on their first tour in 10 years. And lead singer, rapper, whatever he is, screamer, Zach De La Rocca, ends up injuring his leg in the second show of the tour, back on July the 11th. I have not seen any updates on if he's okay, if the tour's continuing, but by all accounts, did not sound good. He was jumping up and down during one of their songs. I don't know if he landed awkwardly, but he had to basically sit down for the rest of the show, a la Phil Collins on this past Genesis tour. Of course, apples and oranges when it comes to age and what Phil Collins has gone through. But then he had to be helped off stage by a couple roadies when the show was done. So be interesting to see how Rage Against the Machine carries on, if this ends up being just a minor injury. Maybe they'll build him a throne like they did for Dave Grohl. What an awful comparison. Comparing Dave Grohl to Zach De La Rocca. Ugh. That's rock and roll blasphemy in my book. Nita Strauss leaving Alice Cooper's band. She's been in there for 8 years, only playing live shows, concerts only. Hasn't been featured or partaking of anything in terms of studio albums, recording sessions. So Alice Cooper's bringing back a former guitarist from his band, Kane Roberts. Then finally, for News of the World, wrapping up segment 1 here on the Fortress of Rock. Very, very interesting story involving the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. A Hall of Fame curator plus 2 other men have been indicted for trying to sell stolen handwritten Eagles lyrics that Don Henley had wrote. I believe Hotel California was included. Value approximately $1 million. So the man that was entrusted, one of the men or women that was entrusted with taking care of and acquiring all the great memorabilia at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I know I destroy the Rock Hall of Fame, but that's more so because of their induction and election procedures. The Hall of Fame itself is cool. Always recommend that you go check it out. Although I don't know why I would ever recommend anybody go to Cleveland, Ohio. Try to make a weekend of it, find a concert, maybe go see Bruce Springsteen there. And then check out the Rock Hall of Fame while you're staying at the Mistake by the Lake. But again, very ironic in a way, very funny that, and tragic in some ways, that one of the people that is entrusted in caring for all of those great outfits, lyrics, all the different things that you walk through the Rock Hall of Fame and see that take you back to Elvis Presley and Prince, the Rolling Stones, all those items, all those artifacts. And this guy betrayed the trust of every rock and roll fan out there by trying to sell these lyrics, which I guess had been stolen previously. I don't think the theft happened within the last few months. I think it's been a while since they were stolen. So, of course, my detective mind, because I read a lot of mysteries, I watch a lot of crime procedurals on TV, tells me that maybe they were stolen. The people that stole them knew they needed to sit on them for a long time before they could even attempt to try to make money off of them. And then maybe they thought they had found the right guy with this Hall of Fame curator. Every once in a great while, you can get away with it. You can find a way to not get caught. But 9 times out of 10, kids, they're going to nail you, especially with cameras everywhere in this day and age, cell phones, security systems. Don't be that arrogant person who thinks, I'm smart enough, I can pull off the heist of the century. Because 99.9% of the time, you're probably going to screw up somewhere along the line, and it could lead to you getting caught. Especially something like handwritten Don Henley lyrics. I mean, we're not talking money, gold, diamonds. This is something so unique. I guess you could find a filthy rich rock and roll fan who would be more than willing to pay the money under the table and just keep the lyrics hidden away forever, satisfying some little itch that they've got to collect illicit rock memorabilia, whatever. Enjoy the music. Just enjoy the music. All right, time to wrap up segment 1. News of the World is done. Looking forward to segment 2. Lots of good stuff to discuss here on July the 14th, a day earlier than normal, including my review of the Doobie Brothers' 50th anniversary tour live this past Sunday in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hang out for another minute. We're going to get through a quick promo, and I will be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, the news of the world, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Fortress of Rock. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. As always, glad to have you aboard a day early this week, July the 14th, Thursday, episode 48. Normally, we're rocking your world on a Friday night, but I have got the Sonic Slam tour tomorrow night in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Tom Kiefer, LA Guns, and Faster Pussycat. So, you're getting everything a day early. But that does not mean we are skimping on content, especially here in the breakdown segment. Our weekly review of concerts, new albums, and new songs. Starting off with the Doobie Brothers live at Van Andel Arena. Told you I was going to bring Van Andel Arena back up again. One of the most underrated venues in America. Grand Rapids, Michigan, this past Sunday, July the 10th. Doobies played for about 2 hours and 10 minutes. 24 songs in their set. Now, unlike our album reviews, which we'll get to in a minute, I don't normally go song by song through a concert review. Instead, I just want to give you a general overview of my impressions of the show. I've seen the Doobie Brothers once before, but not with Michael McDonald. Saw them back in the late 90s at Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida. This was a great show. Not top-notch, not an all-time great. I had a little bit of difficulty looking back and reviewing this one because I came out of it being a little more negative than I should have been about some of the aspects of the show. For example, the set list, in my opinion, was way too much backloaded. They held on to all of their biggest songs for the last half hour, 45 minutes, which made the first hour and 15 minutes a little bit rough to get through. Again, not saying it was bad. Now you're kind of getting why I had trouble trying to piece together a review for this, because in the end, it was a really, really good show. But the set list, again, a little bit inconsistent. Michael McDonald, I know he's an artist, an artiste. He's going to do what he wants on his songs. He doesn't like to sing songs, obviously, the same way twice, it seems like. Very hard to sing along with his hits. You know, songs like What a Fool Believes, Minute by Minute, and especially the one that really, really drove me crazy because it is one of my top 3 Doobie Brothers songs of all time, was how he really, along with the arrangement, in my opinion, botched It Keeps You Running. Why do I say that they botched the arrangement? Because it seemed like, and this is my last complaint, 3 complaints. Uneven set list, Michael McDonald, and way, way, way too much saxophone. Every other song had like a minute long saxophone solo, and they took the edge out of It Keeps You Running by putting the saxophone in there as a prominent piece in the live version that they played Sunday. It Keeps You Running has a little bit of an edge, the studio version, a little bit of an edge, a little bit of intensity that this version lacked by putting the saxophone in such a prominent manner. Now, on the positive side, again, once they got to their hits, it was fantastic. My favorite Doobie Brothers song, they nailed it, did a great job with it because, of course, Michael McDonald wasn't really involved in it. That would be Long Train Running towards the end of the main set. They did play again towards the front half of the set 3 of their new songs off the album that came out last year, Liberté. Not a big fan. Thought it was pretty much generic rock and roll. I guess the one song out of the 3 that I did like on the album that came out well at the concert was Don't You Mess With Me. They played a couple deep cuts. One in particular was really intriguing, really cool. A song I'd never heard before. I'll admit I'm not a Doobie Brothers aficionado. I don't own all their albums. I don't know each and every song going all the way back through The Captain and Me, and I don't know all the Doobie Brothers stuff. So they played a song called Clear as the Driven Snow, which I think Patrick Simmons described as a psychedelic folk song. And it ended up being a really, really cool song, very enjoyable. And that it's something you get when you get great sound in a venue. And again, that's why I love Van Andel Arena, is we've gotten great sound at almost every show at Van Andel. I talked a few months back about Bon Jovi at the Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, and that venue is extremely, extremely hit and miss when it comes to sound quality. Bon Jovi was awful. Metallica was so-so. Now, Bob Seger was great over the last 4 or 5 years, contrasting different shows at the same venue. And it helps for somebody like me to enjoy a song that I've never heard before, like Clear as the Driven Snow, when the sound quality in the venue is top notch. Sirens, car alarms going off as I tape this. Somebody must be a Michael McDonald fan out there. They're not happy with me criticizing him. Tom Johnston, of course, the de facto leader now of the Doobie Brothers, along with Patrick Simmons, who was high as a kite during this show. At one point, giddily remarking on everybody on one of the slower songs, having, of course, all their cell phones out with the light function. Wow, man, that's cool. That is so awesome how you guys do that. Wow, man, it's kind of like lighters back in the day. Yeah. Oh, my God. Thanks for the commentary, Cheech. Now, luckily, the fact that he was obviously stoned out of his gourd did not affect his ability to perform. And again, Tom Johnston was solid as a rock, sounded great, played some fantastic guitar. Again, overall, a very, very enjoyable show. Played all the songs you would have expected. So if you get a chance, again, this is a show, a tour, 3 years in the making. Bought the tickets for the show back in 2019. Thanks to COVID, couple delays, postponements, but finally got to see the Doobies again with Michael McDonald. Very, very, very good show. So let's move on to albums. There's a band out there that just put out their debut album called Deraps. Deraps. I usually like to try to figure things out for myself. I'm not a big fan of delving into the internet, Wikipedia, Googling stuff, unless I absolutely have to. So I tried to figure out what the name Deraps meant. I looked at it backwards. I said, spared? Okay, maybe. One of these times, of course, that I should have just looked up the band on Amazon or Wikipedia. Because, of course, that's the last name of the frontman, the lead singer and guitarist, Jacob Deraps. The band is Canadian, Australian, and they are obviously huge, massive Van Halen fans, because this album sounds like a heartfelt, yet at times patronizing attempt to sound almost exactly like early Van Halen. Again, like with the Doobie Brothers review, I'm going to sound a little more negative than I probably should, because I did like this album, but I think I liked it more because, again, it reminded me of old school Van Halen. Now this, we go through track by track. 11 tracks on the CD. First up, Invasion. A short 14-second guitar solo. Yes, obviously, to me at least, a blatant attempt to find their own eruption. And that leads into Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, which is okay. It's one of the two songs on the album I know has gotten some attention. Again, Deraps tries to incorporate a David Lee Roth type of rapping, talking, howling throughout the song. But honestly, in my opinion, the song's just not that strong. It's okay. Then we get into the part of the album that really, for a while, starts to take off. One of my favorite songs on the album, track 3, is My Side of Town, where you finally hear this band start to maybe find their own footing, even though I could hear Dokken in this song. I could hear, of course, Van Halen. But My Side of Town is a very, very fun, cool song. Then next up is Live Fast, Die Slow. Solid. Nothing really spectacular. A little bit better than Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, but kind of in the same vein. And of course, that leads us into, with my fantastic segue, song 5, Veins of My Heart, which is probably the big single, I guess you would say. At least I would back in my teenage years. Veins of My Heart seems to be the one song on Spotify that's taking off. It's very catchy, very cool song. Then you get, again, an homage, a copy, a blatant attempt to try to be Van Halen 2.0 with Elizabeth. Now, I liked the solo. I thought it was cool. But again, the way this album is structured and the way a lot of the songs sound, it's just over the top in terms of how these guys are trying to sound like Van Halen from the late 70s and early 80s. Next song up, Make You Groove, a really, really cool song, very catchy song. Track 8, Wild to the Woman, not bad. Again, going back to Live Fast, Die Slow, and Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, pretty standard meat and potatoes, early 80s rock. Song 9 is probably the most creative. The song that probably sets Deraps apart from just being a band trying to clone their favorite bands from the early 80s. On My Mind is a mid-tempo song that's really cool, catchy. The farthest of any of the 11 songs on this album from Van Halen. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's actually a really, really cool song. Then we get song 10, which is just a complete and total pointless waste of time, called Fuck Off. Apologies, I know we're in a non-explicit podcast, but that is the title of the song. I will only say it the one time. Again, lead singer Deraps tries to do a little bit more of that David Lee Roth improv, rapping, scatting stuff. You can't do it better than David Lee Roth. Nobody ever could. Nobody ever will. And again, it's another example. If I wanted to break this album down and analyze it and point out how many different ways that they're trying to copy or imitate Van Halen, this is yet another one. Now, beyond that, this song is pointless. It's over the top. Musically, maybe you could say it sounds something like Van Halen, but Van Halen would never, ever, ever, ever make a song this crass with that kind of title. They were a little more subtle, not much. I know Van Halen was not known for subtlety, but they would never have been this blatant as to write a song like this, especially lyrically. And then finally, again, another nod to Van Halen to wrap the album up for Deraps. Track 11, a remake of Ballroom Blitz. Again, how many of the old David Lee Roth era Van Halen albums had remakes on them, especially remakes of old classic hits like You Really Got Me, You're No Good, Dancing in the Street. So, of course, Deraps has to throw in their remake of Ballroom Blitz. And now I would like to point out, first and foremost, Ballroom Blitz, while I like the song, it's been done to death. Let's put a moratorium on anybody ever getting to do a remake of Ballroom Blitz ever again. Sweet's version, of course, the original, great. I like Crocus's version a little bit better, but that's it. We're done. No more. Nobody else out there needs to do a version of Ballroom Blitz ever again. Okay, kids? Stop it. Find some other songs to cover. So that being said, I did enjoy Deraps. I will listen to it again. It's a fun album. Definitely has flaws, as I've noted. Especially if you're a fan of Van Halen, early 80s, hard rock, you will enjoy this album. It's like going to your favorite restaurant, ordering your favorite meal, knowing what you're going to get. It's reliable. It's dependable. I don't know if I'd say it's much more than that, though. All right, 2 songs here to wrap up the breakdown segment here on the Fortress of Rock. First up, been waiting for this song to be released for weeks and weeks. I knew Collective Soul had a new album coming out in August called Vibrating. But because very close in terms of release date to their huge anniversary release of Discipline Breakdown, they had to hold off longer than a band normally would have to release the first single. So we finally, last Friday, right around the time I was taping our last episode, they released All Our Pieces. First single off, Vibrating. Collective Soul never lets me down through all the years. We're going on 30 years of Collective Soul now. They've never had a clunker in terms of an album. Very, very rarely do you get even a deep track that's not at least halfway decent. And of course, All Our Pieces to me is no exception. It's a little poppy, little tiny bit formulaic, but I'll take it. It's still solid. It still sounds like prime Collective Soul. Now I will say this. A song like All Our Pieces on a really, really great Collective Soul album, something like Dosage or the Yellow Album, All Our Pieces probably would have been the 4th or 5th best song at best on albums like that. So, let's refrain from totally judging this song one way or the other until we hear more. If this is the strongest track on Vibrating, then I'm probably going to have, finally, after 30 years, some issues with Collective Soul. But again, I like All Our Pieces, solid, catchy. And then, of course, I mentioned on Wrap It Up over the past week or two that I finally was going to get to listen to some new King's X, a band that, like the Doobie Brothers, I know a lot of their stuff, but I am not the type of guy that's been a sycophant, a collector of each and every album, and I don't know each and every track off all their old albums. But I've always liked the sound of King's X. Always an interesting mix of prog rock, pop rock, hard rock, even a little metal. Of course, Doug Pinnick, the leader of King's X. New song, first single off their upcoming album, Let It Rain. And I'm telling you what, maybe it's just me. Maybe I am just starved for really, really good new music. But Let It Rain is fantastic. This, to me, is a stronger lead-off single for an album than Collective Soul's All Our Pieces. Let It Rain has got everything you want from King's X. Maybe not quite as proggy as some of their other stuff in the past. A little bit more straightforward, meat and potatoes, rock and roll. Very catchy. Maybe the guitar solo's a little bit messy. But I love it. I love Let It Rain. Cannot wait for the new album. Cannot wait for the next release from King's X. So there you go, kids. Segment 2 breakdown is done. Lots of positives this week. I know we've had a few weeks here over the past month or so where we've had a lot of negative stuff, a lot of mediocre to bad music. This week, a lot of really, really good music. So get out there, listen to it. Of course, when we get to our final segment, Wrap It Up, we'll talk about some more of the stuff that we're going to be reviewing and stuff that's coming up in the next month or so. So one more quick promo here. Then we head into I Want to Go Back. So hang out for just a minute, and I will be right back with you. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Glad to have you aboard a day earlier than normal. The Fortress usually drops on Friday nights, but you're getting this on July the 14th, Thursday night, because I have got a concert tomorrow night. Tom Kiefer, LA Guns, Faster Pussycat. Yes, going back to my favorite era of music, the 80s, on the Sonic Slam tour as it hits Fort Wayne, Indiana. That being said, segment 3 here, as always, is I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money, the late, great Eddie Money. Our anniversaries of classic album releases, moments in rock history, birthdays, all that good stuff. And of course, this is always the time every week where I want to acknowledge my sources for a lot of these story ideas. UltimateClassicRock.com, ThisDayInMusic.com, and the Van Halen News Desk, of course. Keep in mind, as always, the ideas come from those websites. The thoughts behind the opinions, the ranting, the raving, the anger, the joy is mine and mine alone. All right, that being said, I decided to cheat this week again because we're taping a day early. I threw a couple Thursday anniversaries and birthdays in there, but normally, trying to stay with our normal pattern, most of the stuff I selected would have been anniversaries, birthdays from Friday. So let's start off with the anniversaries. Couple from the Stones, the Rolling Stones. Again, these are Friday anniversaries, July the 15th. Very, very significant moments for the Rolling Stones in the United States when it comes to record sales, album sales, singles. July the 15th, 1965, number one in the U.S. on the singles chart was what many consider the greatest rock song of all time, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. I will say it's a good song, maybe a great song, but I would not place it anywhere close to being one of the top songs of all time. Again, it's not my era. I didn't grow up with it. I understand the attachment that a lot of people would have to it who grew up with that song as a kid or a teenager, not trying to create rock and roll enemies, but it's just my opinion. We've all got opinions. Mine are no more important or less important than yours. And while I Can't Get No Satisfaction, it's not the be-all, end-all for me. Same date, July the 15th. How about this for some rock and roll synergy? 1978. Number one on the U.S. album chart, Some Girls, again by the Rolling Stones. Very, very good album. Of course, the Stones were in their heyday there when Some Girls came out. I believe Miss You comes off of Some Girls. Stones had so many great albums there, going through the early mid-70s all the way up through maybe Tattoo You. Those are the years that made them the rock gods that they are. Going back to today, again, a day early as we tape, July the 14th, 1982, 40 years ago. The Wall, the film, not the album, the film premiered overseas. I've seen it. I saw it a long, long time ago. And I'm usually pretty good with my movie instincts. And that movie critic part of my brain, the culture critic that remembers all the songs, all the TV shows, all the movies that I've seen throughout my 50 plus years of existence. That part of my brain just tells me, nah, you don't need to watch it again. You don't need to watch it again. Not saying it was bad. I really don't have any feelings about it one way or the other, except, again, that little Roger Ebert part of my brain just keeps telling me there's no reason to go back and revisit The Wall. And of course, I have problems with Roger Waters. I've mentioned this multiple times on the show in the past. I think he is such an arrogant, pretentious jerk, by all accounts, by everything I've heard from interviews with Mason, Gilmore. It would have been, I can't see how those guys put up with him for as long as they did. Creative, in a way brilliant, of course. Some of our best writers, actors, directors, musicians are creative yet maddeningly hard to get along with. It's the whole cliche. There's a fine line between genius and insanity. Roger Waters is one of those people that probably exemplifies that better than most. Going back to tomorrow, Friday, our normal podcast taping date, July the 15th, 2000. Paul Young died at the age of 53. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we honored him recently for his what would have been his birthday. Paul Young, not the poppy every time you go away Paul Young, but the Sad Cafe, Mike and the Mechanics, Paul Young. Sang lead on Mike and the Mechanics' hit All I Need Is a Miracle. And then finally, July the 15th, 2018, Guns N' Roses' video for November Rain passed 1 billion, yes, billion, Dr. Evil, billion views on YouTube. Significant because at the time that was the only video from the 90s that ever had reached that mark. Now, of course, I love GNR. I just saw them last year in concert. Second time I'd seen them. First time was disappointing. This time was much, much, much better. But I will say, I am not a fan of November Rain. While I liked Use Your Illusions 1 and 2, nothing is ever going to compare to Appetite for Destruction. That is a seminal, all-time touchstone album. And a song like November Rain really just knocks a little bit of the luster, the dirty, nasty punk metal luster off of GNR. Kind of like I saw a week or two ago, Carrie Underwood was singing with Guns N' Roses on stage. What is that all about? As much as I do not like Nirvana, I can't see, if Kurt Cobain was still alive, I just can't see Kurt Cobain sharing a microphone or a stage with Carrie Underwood. Something about it just, again, dings your reputation as rock gods. As does the song, to me at least, November Rain. All right, birthdays. We'll start off with the one birthday for today, again, as we tape here on July the 14th, Thursday. This is going to make me feel old, If you're in my age group in your 50s, this will make you feel old, especially if you've got kids, especially if you've got younger girls. 35 years old today. Yes, 35 years old today. July the 14th, 1987. He was born Dan Reynolds, the leader, the front man for Imagine Dragons. You might wonder why I'm bringing up Imagine Dragons. Well, I did see them in concert once. Again, I have a young daughter. She wanted to go. It was one of the few bands that she likes or liked that I actually thought might be halfway acceptable, tolerable to see in concert. And they were. Imagine Dragons really put on a pretty good show. I was glad we went to see them. And again, I hate going back to that Bon Jovi concert from earlier here in 2022 because that was so miserable. But Imagine Dragons were a hell of a lot better than Bon Jovi. So take that for what you will. I just take it for the fact that him only being 35 years old, oh man, that makes me feel old. He was born when I was almost out of college. Yikes. Now, getting back into the classic rock we all know and love, and moving on to Friday, our normal taping date, July the 15th, 1946, 76 years old today. The great voice, one of the greatest voices in rock and roll history, Linda Ronstadt. Loved a lot of her stuff in the 70s. Blue Bayou, Living in the USA. Just an unbelievable voice. That being said, she's a nut job. I watched a documentary about her a few years back, and she is just, and I don't accuse me of ripping on illnesses, diseases, whatever. That is not what I'm going for. That is not what I'm trying to point out here. July the 15th, 1949, which would make him 73 years old today. Trevor Horn, the leader of the Buggles. The Buggles. Now let's see how many of you out there immediately know who I'm talking about when I mention the Buggles. Of course, the Buggles were part of the revolution that changed a lot of our lives in the 80s when we were younger. The Buggles, of course, got the slot as the first video ever played on MTV. Video killed the radio star. Of course, MTV is now a sham, a travesty. It's a shameful, ridiculous, meaningless offshoot of what it used to be back when it actually was the nation's radio station. We were all, don't say you didn't because I know you did. Don't tell me you weren't like the rest of us sitting around after school watching 3, 4, 5 hours of music videos every day. The visual aspect that was brought in to complement and enhance our music was brilliant. The VJs were all, for the most part, personable. I don't think I really disliked any of them. Some you like more than others. But MTV was one of the greatest media creations of all time, bar none. And it's just, again, an absolute outright shame what that channel has now become. It is garbage, pure and simple, absolute garbage. Teen Mom, what is it, 16 and pregnant? Our parents probably thought when we were watching videos of Billy Squier, Pat Benatar, Culture Club, that we were rotting our brains. You want to tell me that what they've got on there now, how that is just disgustingly chipping away at the moral fabric of our young people? How does that send a message of positivity to anybody 16 and pregnant? To me, that's like the sick people who like to stop and look at a fatal car accident. Watch something positive. Watch something with a better message. That's why I have always hated, I cannot stand, cannot abide reality television. Moving up to July the 15th, 1952, 70 years old today for the former guitarist from 38 Special, Jeff Carlisi. I make no bones about the fact that I think 38 Special is another one of those underrated, overlooked bands that are still much more popular than they're given credit for, in a way, much more influential than they're given credit for. Look at all the songs. Look at all the hits. Now, I will say I've qualified stuff earlier in the show, like King's X, Doobie Brothers, where I've said I'm not the kind of guy who's listened to every album and knows every album track. 38 Special, I'm pretty close, though. I'm pretty close. I have all their albums. I will admit the last few, like Drivetrain, I haven't really listened to more than once or twice. But you go back to Wild-Eyed Southern Boys. Come on. Unbelievable album. Unbelievable album. Strength in Numbers. And then finally, to wrap up, I want to go back. A couple birthdays that tie into the great Sammy Hagar. First up, July the 15th, 1956. 66 years old today, the fantastic Joe Satriani. Hopefully, maybe, possibly, he will partake in some sort of Van Halen tribute show or tour in 2023. Or maybe, possibly, hopefully, I doubt it happens, but maybe Sammy Hagar gets Chickenfoot back together again. Of course, everything seems to be going well with the Circle right now, and it's a lot easier, I think, to schedule things with Vic Johnson and Jason Bonham than it would be with Joe Satriani and Chad Smith. And then, we just mentioned him, another Sammy Hagar confidant. 10 years later, July the 15th, 1966, which makes him 56 years old, the son of John Bonham, of course, the drummer for Led Zeppelin, Jason Bonham. Yes, he is currently on tour, a member of Sammy Hagar and the Circle. Also goes out with the Led Zeppelin Experience from time to time. Cool dude. Very cool dude. One of the few children of rock gods that gets it. that figures out how to keep his or her nose clean, learned from the mistakes of their parents while still loving them, still admiring them. Yes, Wolfgang Van Halen, of course, comes to mind. Happy birthday to Joe Satriani and Jason Bonham. And that'll do it for I Want to Go Back. Segment 3 is done, over, wrapped up. Speaking of wrapping it up, fourth and final segment where we look ahead to reviews in the coming weeks and months. Right around the corner, kids. Stay tuned. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, that'll about do it for this week's episode of the Fortress of Rock. Again, a day early, Thursday, July the 14th. Here as we wrap it up, our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Next week, I've mentioned it multiple times during this episode. Very excited, very geeked for tomorrow night. I've missed out 2 times here over the last 6-7 years in seeing Tom Kiefer. One time due to illness, specific illness on his part, and then the other time because of COVID. So now, hopefully, fingers crossed, about 27 hours from now as I tape this, I will be seeing Tom Kiefer, LA Guns, and Faster Pussycat on the Sonic Slam Tour. Of course, if you do not know who Tom Kiefer is, number one, shame on you, the voice of Cinderella. Again, that review will be coming next week here on the Fortress of Rock. In 2 weeks, we're hoping to have a review of Kansas. Be the first time I have ever seen Kansas. Hoping is the key word right now. Kansas is dealing with a COVID situation. They have had to cancel a couple shows this weekend where they were playing with 38 Special, who we discussed in the last segment. Hopefully, I will get to see Kansas finally. I had tickets to see them, and again, COVID messed things up. Ended up getting a refund. I didn't want to wait around to see what the rescheduling situation was going to be like. Got lucky. They're coming back around on tour again in this area. But COVID is starting once again. Boy, I never wanted to think I would end up saying this again. COVID rearing its ugly head yet again. We're starting to see it in sports again, concerts. Ugh. At some point, we've just got to start treating it like the flu. Let it go. Get your shot, get vaccinated. The government is not putting a chip in you. I understand if you don't want to get the shot. Believe me, you should never be forced to do anything you don't want to do. But you're also going to have to suffer the consequences. Let's just hope, on top of the fact that hopefully the bands stay healthy. Hopefully we don't have to go back to where we were a year ago, where we have to show proof of vaccination and wear masks. If we got to do it, we got to do it, but it doesn't mean we have to like it. Albums. Next week, Journey's new album, Freedom. We'll have a review of that for you. A couple weeks after that, probably, hopefully, coinciding with the Kansas concert review, we will be reviewing Jack White's second album of 2022, Entering Heaven Alive. I've decided just not even going to worry about the singles. I'm just going to wait for the whole album to come out, and I will just give you a review of the full album when it hits in a couple weeks. As far as singles go, we mentioned The Cult, Give Me Mercy. That'll be on tap for next week. The first single off their upcoming album, Under the Midnight Sun. Skid Row has just announced a brand new single off their upcoming album, The Gang's All Here. Tear It Down will be on the agenda for next week. Also, a new David Lee Roth song, supposedly very mellow. I have not checked it out yet. Of course, being a Van Halen fanatic, I am particularly interested in hearing how this sounds. David Lee Roth's Pointing at the Moon will also be in the breakdown segment next week. So we're looking at Journey. We're looking at a review of the Sonic Slam tour. And we're looking at new singles from The Cult, Skid Row, and David Lee Roth all next week on The Fortress. Still possibly looking into new music from Queensryche. Possibly might be seeing Queensryche live with Judas Priest in the fall. That is still pending. Could go either way. And I've mentioned almost every week for the past few months this brand new band, to me at least. I know they've been around a while, but Devil's Train. Still want to dig into their new album, their new songs. So that's a potential review coming up within the next month or so. And of course, we've mentioned Collective Soul's new album, Vibrating, comes out in August. We'll, of course, review that. We'll see what new stuff comes out this Friday that we can review for you in the coming weeks. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I did. Very, very happy that there was a lot of positive stuff in terms of new music to listen to. Check out Deraps, especially if you like 80s hard rock, early 80s, late 70s Van Halen, Dokken, that type of stuff. New Collective Soul single sounds good. New King's X single sounds great. So thumbs up all around, including the Doobie Brothers live on the 50th anniversary tour. Thumbs down to Bruce Springsteen for not putting Chicago or Indianapolis so far on his 2023 U.S. tour slate with the E Street Band. I hope you have a great week, great weekend, and of course we will be back in our normal slot next Friday, the 22nd of July, with episode 49 of The Fortress of Rock. Again, until then, take care, rock out, love your family, love your friends. I'm the Maestro. We'll check you out next week.